what was happening between me and that teacher, me and that professor, is the difference between liberalism and conservatism. You see, liberals, when they have a problem, they look out externally. They say, who can I blame? If I'm short, it's because of tall people. If I'm poor, it's because of rich people, right? This is the way they think. But conservatives, we do something weird, totally weird and foreign, right? We look inward. We look internally. We say, I have a problem, and now I need to fix it. Beyond that, you know, I had to drop out of school because Sally Mae declined my loan in the 4th year, is when they had the big collapse. So imagine being me, over $100,000 in student loans, and I can't finish, but I got to start paying them back in 6 months, right? So I had to drop out of school, hit the ground running, figuring out how I was going to pay them back, which I did, Bernie Sanders, without stealing from anybody else. I really wish they would do that, student loan forgiveness. I would be so angry, so angry. You know, you make a decision, you pay for it, not everybody else. And as I was working to pay back these loans, I started working in private equity for a few years. And, you know, I never really cared about politics. I never thought about my life in the context of politics until an event happened in the world, and a man by the name of Donald J. Trump came down the escalator. And whether you were politically inclined or you weren't paying attention to politics, you paid attention to politics on that day. It was impossible to ignore that man, for better or for worse. For me, it was for worse, as I said, oh, come on, this guy can't be the president of the United States. It's ridiculous. He's the guy that says you're fired. I remember thinking he would make a mockery of the White House, you know, that this man should not become the president of the United States, and I didn't feel good about it. But I always say, and it's fine, me and him are friends now, we talk about that. What I always say, though, what was remarkable is that while I didn't think that he was equipped, I didn't think he had the experience, what was more important were the things that I never thought during that time. Not once did I say to myself, he shouldn't be the president because he's a racist. And yet overnight, this man who nobody had an issue with, he was on the main stage for decades, a celebrity for decades. Overnight, I watched the left call this man a racist, a sexist, a misogynist. At one point, they even called him incestuous and said that he had feelings for Ivanka. Do you remember that? That sick story that went out? Overnight. And that's how I got started. Because the left overplayed their hand. That was it. Because I said to myself, something's not right. So fast, so swift, and they're calling him all of these names. And I asked myself a most important question. I said, is it plausible that racism is now being used as a theme to turn black people into single-issue voters? Is it plausible that sexism is now being used as a theme to turn women into single-issue voters? And of course, the answer was yes. So I had the idea, I said, now that I know this information, I began reading and just reading and listening to voices that I had never listened to before. Dr. Thomas Sowell, Dr. Ben Carson, Dr. Condoleezza Rice, heroes in the black community. And so disrespected, so disrespected. I started reading their books and I suddenly felt like I was awake. Like I had been sleeping my entire life, like I had been lied to my entire life, like I had been convinced to see myself as a victim. I had been manipulated, and I knew instantly that I had to get into this. I had no plan, but I knew, and I knew the odds were going to be against me. I knew it was going to be an uphill climb, but I knew that something had to be done, and that now that I had this truth, it wasn't enough to know it. I had to share it, and you know, my big idea was to launch a YouTube channel. And fortunately for me, you know, my 3rd video, and thanks to people like you in this room, went trending worldwide with 26 million views. That video was a video of me ranting, because you will remember after Donald J. Trump became the President of the United States, very shortly thereafter, the Charlottesville debacle happened. And that was unbelievable. Unbelievable, because I came home and my cousin was watching CNN, and I was just picking it up in the background. And CNN, if you were, if you were watching it, they were trying to convince me as a black American that the KKK was now alive and well because Donald J. Trump got elected, right? Like, we told you this would happen, and now it's here. They're back, right? People are riding in horses, and this is it. And I got so angry, and I started ranting for 4 minutes on my computer, and I'll tell you where this anger came from. The worst thing that the left does is that they cheapen evil. They cheapen real evil, right? And I was angry because when they started talking and trying to say that the Ku Klux Klan was alive and well, they were cheapening the real experiences that my ancestors lived through. They were cheapening it. And when I say my ancestors, I don't mean long dead ancestors. I mean my grandfather, who's still breathing, who grew up with the real Ku Klux Klan in the segregated South. They cheapened that experience. And these stories were so real to me growing up. To have my grandfather around the dinner table explain to us that he grew up with the real Ku Klux Klan, that when he was a kid, they would come by his home and they would spray bullets. And what's remarkable about that is that my grandfather, when he tells that story, he doesn't tell it like a victim. He tells it with a sense of power. He says, and my daddy would grab the shotgun and shoot back at them boys. That strength, that power, never a victim. Segregated South, I've never heard my grandfather ever, growing up in his home, ever utter a bad word about a white person, ever. He would just say it was a different time. And he worked his entire life. His first job in the segregated South when he was 5 years old, laying out tobacco to dry, picking cotton on a sharecropping farm. This was what my grandfather had to do, right? This was his day in and day out. And now I look around and I see all these little victims who wouldn't know a hard day of work if it jumped up and punched them in the face. Most of you, know my grandfather. I know in California, you probably saw him sitting behind me when a certain loser named Ted Lieu, right, decided to play a tape when I was sitting in the House Judiciary Committee. My grandfather is easily the closest person to me. I love him so much. And I feel that everything that he lived through was to give me this experience to go through life, not as a victim, but as a part of this society. And to know that, after raising his kids in the North, my grandfather returned back to the South with my grandmother to retire, and he purchased the sharecropping farm that he grew up on. He was able to live that life because he made good decisions. That was it. Not because he cried, not because he protested when something bad happened, not because he was shrieking in the streets, not because he was demanding handouts. He was able to do that because of the American dream, and because that is what is on the line. That's what I fight to protect, right? That's why I launched Blexit, the Blexit organization, the black exit from this liberal ideology, which has become a cancer. It is a cancer. Liberalism is a cancer because it destroys lives. When you accept yourself and see yourself as a victim, like my granddaddy always says, if you believe you can't, you won't. It's that easy. A society now that wants to turn everybody into victims is a society that is telling and convincing people they can't before they even try. It's a society that is making people see themselves as the little man and not letting them know that in America, it's always been this. If you work hard, if you stay out of trouble, if you stop making excuses, this country will reward you.